The Kawanishi N1K1-J Shiden was a single-engine Japanese fighter that entered service in the closing stages of the Second World War. It became one of Japan's most successful land-based fighters despite its unlikely origins. Facing overwhelming odds, it didn't get the recognition it perhaps deserved. The Kawanishi Aircraft Company specialized in floatplanes and flying boats, with the H-6K Mavis and the H-8K Emily being probably the most well-known of its products. The N1K1 Kyofu was a floatplane fighter that flew for the first time on May 6, 1942. Known by the Allied reporting name of Rex, the Kyofu's main purpose was to support amphibious landings where land-based fighters had no airfield to operate from. But when the Kyofu made its operational debut, the Japanese advance had halted, and it quickly became clear that such an aircraft would have less use than a land-based interceptor. For this reason, only 97 were ever produced, with the last few delivered in March 1944. Meanwhile, the Kawanishi company had been working on a land-based version of the N1K1 since December 1941. This version's prototype made its maiden flight on December 31, 1942. Initially, it was received with suspicion by the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Force, since it was a private venture and had little input from that organization. But, after a thorough evaluation of the prototype, in July 1943, it proved to be superior to all Japanese operational fighters at that point. And so, Kawanishi received the go-ahead, and the N1K1-J was officially born. It was baptized Shiden, Japanese for Violet Lightning, and it started equipping units in early 1944 after some delays. The Shiden was baptized with the Allied codename George. It was fitted with an 18-cylinder Nakajima NK/NH Homare 21 radial engine that could develop 1990 horsepower, connected to a huge 4-blade propeller with a diameter of almost 11 feet. This engine was based on the Nakajima Sakae used in the A6M20, and, even though it was quite powerful, it was also troublesome due to unreliable carburetors and the usage of poor quality fuel. It was armed with 420mm Type 99 Model 2 Mark IV cannons and two 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns. It had automatic combat flaps that would retract or extend when needed, relieving the pilot from operating them. This system was a feature of late-war Kawanishi fighters. It was highly appreciated by pilots, and testing proved that it gave an edge in dogfights. The N1K1-J saw action for the first time in the fall of 1944. Mainly in the Philippines, opposing the American campaign to retake them. It flew 303 sorties there, and its pilots claimed more than 40 air victories. Still, the Shiden's operational debut quickly exposed a huge flaw in its landing gear. Due to its origins as a floatplane, the Japanese fighter had a wing that joined the fuselage at the midpoint. Its huge propeller also begged for a large ground clearance. Consequently, the landing gear legs were quite long and complex, leading to a large number of accidents with a collapsed undercarriage. Due to this, the Shiden could only be operated from paved runways. The number of accidents was high, but Kawanishi had always seen the N1K1-J as an interim fighter on the way to the definitive version, the N1K2-J Shiden-Kai, with Kai meaning modified. This improved version flew for the first time on the last day of 1943. By June of the following year, the first examples left the factory, and by early 1945, the Shiden-Kai was equipping frontline units. The improved version differed considerably from its progenitor. The main differences were lengthier fuselage, redesigned tail, modified cowling, removal of the rifle caliber machine guns, and finally and most importantly, a lower wing position, allowing for smaller landing gear legs, increasing their sturdiness. Japan had few fighters that could adequately intercept the B-29s that were becoming common over the Japanese main islands, and the Shiden-Kai was one of the biggest threats Japan could muster against those. So, the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Force placed considerable hope in the Kawanishi fighter, and, in January 1945, a new unit was created. Named the 343rd Kokutai, it was composed mainly of veteran pilots. It was entirely equipped with Shiden-Kais and the few Shiden that were left. That unit's operational debut was on March 19, when Task Force 58 approached the Japanese home islands to attack Kure Harbor and several airfields in the region. More than 300 American aircraft were sent, and of those, more than half were fighters, mostly F-6, F-5 Hellcats. The 343rd Kokutai mustered about 72 Shiden-Kai. Ignoring the usual gross overclaiming by both sides, This day resulted in the Japanese losing 15 N1Ks to 14 Hellcats lost by Task Force 58. This 1-to-1 ratio was probably the best ever achieved by Shiden-Kais, and it was a good result given the odds it was up against. Between March and August 1945, Shiden-Kais tasked with the defense of Japan claimed more than 170 aerial victories, and lost more than 100 of their number in combat. When the Japanese surrendered on August 15, only a few Shiden-Kai were still operational. A total of 97 N1K1, 1007 N1K1-J and 393 N1K2-J were built. 4 of these are still around today, 3 are in American museums and the last is in Japan. The Japanese one was rescued from the bottom of the sea and rebuilt. Many American pilots reported that the George was able to fight on an even footing against their Hellcats. So let's compare the two aircraft as they met over the Philippines in late 1944. Horizontal maneuverability. The Japanese fighter had a lower wing loading despite the much smaller wing area. The Hellcat was one of the largest single-engine fighters of the conflict, but it was also a heavy beast. The time through 360 degrees tells us how good their continued turn performance was, and it was about 2 seconds faster for the Shiden. American pilots stated that many times when closing behind a George, the Japanese pilots would snap roll their aircraft and proceed to escape. This was facilitated by the aircraft's innovative automatic combat flaps. When it came to horizontal maneuverability, the Japanese fighter had an advantage. Vertical maneuverability. The American aircraft had a more powerful engine, and, furthermore, the Japanese engine had reliability issues and poor production quality, due to a lack of proper materials. In addition, toward the end of the war, the Japanese used bad quality fuel, with oil from pine tree roots added to the mixture, ending with a quality of about 85 octane. So, the Homari engine probably produced much less power than advertised. This might explain why there is a large difference in results from different tests concerning the N1K1-J. That is more noticeable in the vertical speed and overall speed values, so I decided to add a range instead of a single value for those characteristics. The Shiden had a better power-to-weight ratio, weighing almost 2 tons less. It could take anywhere between 5.5 and 7.4 minutes to reach 20,000 feet. A huge difference in values, but all better than the Hellcat's value of 7.7. So it seems like it could outclimb the F6F Hellcat, even if marginally in the worst case. Speed. Once again there is a wide range of values for the Shiden's maximum speed. These go from 362 to 408 miles per hour, a huge difference. Several reports from Hellcat pilots seem to hint that the Japanese fighter might have had a small advantage in speed. Be that as it may, with such a range of values it's hard to reach any conclusion. So I would say that their speed was at least comparable. Armament. The Shiden was heavily armed with 420mm cannons. It also carried 2 rifle-caliber machine guns that were of little consequence. The Hellcat had 6 Browning M2 machine guns. There was also a less common loadout with 4 of those and 2 20mm cannons. For this comparison we are assuming the Hellcat with the 6 Brownings. The Shiden carried 100 rounds per cannon compared to 400 rounds per machine gun on the Hellcat. The Japanese fighter took 12.5 seconds to empty those, while the Hellcat took 30, even though it had a greater rate of fire. This was a considerable advantage for the American fighter. It's important to add that the improved Shiden had double the amount of ammo that the version we are comparing here. To look at how much power each gun packed, we used the tables published in Flying Guns World War II, probably the best book ever written on this subject. These tables combine a large number of factors to arrive at a value for the amount of power contained in each round and each gun. Based on this, we can see that the Type 99 20mm cannon HE shell had about 3 times the destructive power of a Browning machine gun API round. Although the cannon's smaller rate of fire reduced this advantage, a single Type 99 cannon packed much more punch than a single Browning M2 machine gun. In the end, the Shiden's weapons were more powerful and better at dealing with hard targets like heavy bombers, but the American fighter might have been better at dealing with lighter targets thanks to its larger volume of fire and ammo pool. The Shiden reached 2,000 feet higher than the Hellcat, but it seems that the Japanese fighter's performance worsened quickly above 20,000 feet. The Hellcat lacked a turbocharger, and, as a consequence, didn't have a stellar performance at high altitude either. The American fighter had an advantage in range. The Shiden was well armored for a Japanese fighter. It had self-sealing fuel tanks and 55mm of armored glass. However, the Hellcat was extremely rugged and had 212 pounds of armor protecting the pilot, Very few fighters could even compare to it in this chapter. So, based on what we covered, I feel that the Shiden was a close match to the Hellcat. Certainly much closer than the Zero Zen it was supposed to replace. The fact that it had a bad kill ratio against the American fighter comes from factors beyond the aircraft itself. If the Shiden had been operated with high quality fuel and made with the best materials, it might have proven to be superior. It's important to add two further notes. First, the US Navy was also employing the F-4U Corsair, which had better overall performance than the Hellcat. The second was that by the conflict's end, the US already had the Hellcat's successor ready to roll out, the F-8F Bearcat. The Shiden-Kai proved to be one of the best Japanese fighters of the war. It had good maneuverability, stability and overall performance, but was seen as hard to fly at lower speeds, and had huge problems with its brakes and brittle landing gear. All of these flaws made it difficult to land, turning it into an unforgiving plane for a novice pilot, and so, many of the Shiden losses were due to accidents. American pilots commonly misidentified the George, confusing it with army fighters like the Ki-84 Frank. Due to this, the final overall kill ratio for the N1K family of fighters is unknown, but it's most probably worse than 1-to-1, which isn't surprising as Japan was in a very difficult situation at the end of the war. Poor quality fuel and production, a lack of experienced pilots and overwhelming enemy numbers all contributed to the N1K's underperformance. With about 1,400 Shidens produced, they were built in relatively small numbers and entered the war when there was little that could be done to change the outcome. As with many weapons for the Axis, in the end, the Shiden is a case of too little, too late. Was this the best fighter available to the Japanese, or do you prefer any other? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching and please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.